Okay, it's 1 o'clock. I think we'll go ahead and get started. Desiree, it looks like the recording is on. Would you confirm?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. I would like to call to order the meeting of the Assembly Budget and Finance Committee of the Whole. It is Thursday, January 21, 2021, and we are noticed from 1 to 2 p.m. today. I'm Suzanne LaFrance. I'm the chair of this committee. Our vice chair of the committee is Assembly Member Cameron Perez-Verdilla. We'll go ahead and start with roll. Ms. Camacho, would you go ahead, please?
Yes, ma'am. Miss Allard. Mr. Constant.
Here.
Mr. Dunbar. Miss Kennedy.
Here.
Miss LaFrance.
Here.
Mr. Peterson. Mr. Perez-Verdilla. Mr. Rivera.
Present.
Mr. Weddleton. And Miss Zalatel.
Here.
We are short a few people, but we're only discussing things and not taking action, so I think we're good to go.
Thank you, Ms. Camacho, and welcome everybody. Appreciate you joining today. Just by way of reminder, the agenda and documents for the meeting are posted online. And in the chat, let me note that Mr. Weddleton is here. So the agenda and other documents are posted on the committee's webpage, which can be accessed through muni.org. If you click on the assembly link and then on the left, scroll down to committees, click on that, and that will bring you to the committee page. And just scroll down to the Budget and Finance Committee, and the documents are there for today. We've got a fairly standard agenda. We'll start with a report from the Budget Advisory Commission and then get an update on CARES Act funding, and then an update on the 2020 and 2021 budgets, followed by the MOA financial status, and then other business if there's anything. We'll then touch on legislative priorities and any budget items for next year, and then go into audience participation at the end. And to members, if you'd like to get in the queue, just please put yourself in the chat or text me at 907-351-7199 if you have any issues. So with that, it looks like we've also been joined by Mr. Dunbar. We'll go ahead and get started with a report from the Budget Advisory Commission, and I think I saw the chair of the commission. Lisa,
yes. Yeah.
Great.
Through the chair, my name is Alyssa Rodriguez. I'm the chair of the Budget Advisory Commission. And I'll just give a quick update on kind of what we've covered in our meeting since we last spoke. We are starting the process of going through our department budget reviews. Last year, everyone was very pleased at the budget, the departmental budget reviews that we did. Everyone was very excited about the individual departments that they reviewed, the opportunity to delve a little bit more deeply. And so that's something that we're going to continue this year. And I believe most BAC members will be taking on more departments to review. Many of us found that it wasn't as daunting to review a particular department. So most of us are taking on a bit more. So we'll have more coverage of the different departments. And then after my report here last month, Mr. Weddleton reached out and had some inquiries about kind of the impact of COVID-19, and could we look into that a little bit more? And I'm paraphrasing here, so Mr. Weddleton, please feel free to correct me if I'm incorrectly paraphrasing. But we kind of looked into how might we tackle that a bit, And to that end, we were discussing having ICER economist Kevin Barry, who I'll post a link to one of the publications that he put out, but he has been doing this research. He's been looking into what is the impact, both from an economic perspective and from a health perspective. And so he's a resource that I believe we will be pulling into the BAC to have a presentation so that we can all kind of increase our own knowledge and awareness of what were the impacts, what are the ongoing impacts, and kind of how should we be thinking about those when we think about trade-offs, essentially. And on top of that, as we discussed, what are some of the things that Budget Advisory Commission members really want to be looking at and focusing our efforts on over the next year? One of the items that came up was planning and redevelopment post-COVID. So all of these things really fit in very nicely together, and I think a lot of us are kind of on the same page with some of the questions that were brought up specifically by Mr. Weddleton, but I'm sure others in the Assembly share that interest in what are the impacts and how might we best evaluate these different actions, both from, again, an economic perspective and then from a health perspective. So those are things that we will be looking into as well. I will post that link to the publication from Dr. Kevin Barry at ICER in the chat in case anyone is interested. But that's all I have for an update, unless anyone has any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Rodriguez, for your update and for the work that you're doing on the committee or on the commission. And are there any members who have questions or comments? Well, we have Ms. Rodriguez here. I appreciate very much that you are looking into the impacts from an economic and health perspective, and thank you for posting the link, https://iceralaska.org/publications/?ID=1805. We will get that reposted on our website as well. Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. I don't see anyone in the chat. Okay, we will go ahead and move on to item B, CARES Act funding, Coronavirus Relief Fund. Two parts to this item. First, the MOA use of funding, and then the second part, pending legislative actions. And do we have someone from the administration who will be going through these items for us?
Through the chair, this is Alex Slivka, Chief Fiscal Officer. So in relation to this, as a reminder, we received roughly $156 million in CARES grant funds. It's our expectation that either by the end, probably into mid-February, we will have fully expended that. From the standpoint of MOA use, I guess the best way to think about this is that in the Assembly's actions, $135 million were allocated to a variety of community programs, small business, rental relief, utility relief, etc. $23 million was allocated toward the municipality of Anchorage. And through the direction given, again, by the U.S. Treasury, we were able to allocate existing payroll expenses for first responders. And so the $23 million functionally offsets what we expect our revenue shortfall to be. And I will not spoil Mr. Moore's thunder when he reports under item D, the update to that. Pending legislative actions, I guess the only thing I could say there is, as we are now in 2021, OMB is working with the controller to draft an item that unfortunately may be coming to you late on the table, that's going to move some of the monies that were supposed to be, that weren't able to be spent in 2020, and that's the two of the items that the Assembly approved in December, AR 2020-135 and AR 2020-426. So we're going to be bringing that to you for introduction on the 26th, hearing on the 9th, to move that money to 2021 so we can spend it. The other thing I would say that I think most people are aware of, the secondary CARES grant funding that was passed and approved at the end of December included a number of additional programs, one of which was rental relief. I would report that we today received from the U.S. Treasury $35,431,860 to be utilized for rental relief. So again, you are probably working on drafting some sort of ordinance or resolution for you to accept that money so we can expend it. I would just note for the record, these funds, which ultimately are to support rental relief, they are non-taxable to the recipient, which is a good thing. And I will stop there.
Thank you, Mr. Slivka. We have two members in the queue. First, Mr. Constant, and then Ms. Zalatel. Mr. Constant?
Thank you, Alex. So the 35 million you just mentioned, is that a partial payment?
No, through the chair, that is a full payment. I know we had originally guesstimated something closer to 80, but when we looked more closely at the actual legislation, we got what was our expected proportionate share.
So the state is set to receive 200 million. Anchorage is set to receive 35 of that, so about 15% of the total.
That's how it stands now. So the other way to think of it, and I know Jason walked through this math, was because of the size, we were able to get some money directly, and we. So what the legislation exactly said was 40% of the 200 million or 80 million could be claimed directly by cities. Since we were the only city of the size, over 200,000, but we got roughly 40% of the population. So I guess the follow-up question could be, we will most likely have a discussion with the state in terms of whether some additional funds should be funneled to Anchorage based on our population. So I'm sure that's a conversation we will be having.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Thank you, Mr. Slivka. Ms. Zalatel?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Slivka, do you know if these funds we received have the 10% that allow the 10% of the funds to be used for case management for those who are seeking rental assistance?
I do not know, but I can certainly find out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Slivka and Ms. Zalatel. We've got Mr. Constant in the queue. Go ahead, Mr. Constant.
Thank you. Ms. Zalatel's question also queued up. My memory seems to be that some portion of these funds may be usable for utility relief payments as well. Can you investigate that, Mr. Slivka?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Constant, and thank you for that update, Mr. Slivka. Are there any other questions from members? I don't see anyone else, so we'll go ahead and move on to the next agenda item, which is C, update on 2020 and 2021 budgets. Mr. Wilbur, you want to take us through this?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. This is Lance Wilbur. I'm the Director of Office of Management and Budget. So on the update for 2020, working with the controller, the month of October has recently closed. October was a little bit more complex than normal because that is the month that included the sale of ML&P. So we had to make sure that we were getting as much of the information that we had in October. The good news is that at the end of October, we were about 84% through the end of the year. And at that point in time, in general government, a little more than 72% of the budget had been spent. And then another probably 5% had been encumbered. So overall, at least at the end of October, the municipality on the general government side looked pretty good. When you dig a little bit deeper into that, our labor portion was running a little bit hot. We're at about 3%.
Mr. Wilbur, I
Yes,
apologize to interrupt. Would you be able to increase your volume? We've got some folks who can't hear you clearly.
I will try.
Thank you.
Is that better?
Little better.
What's the problem there? I will speak up.
Thank you.
Yes, my apologies. So on the 2020 for October, overall, the municipality is doing pretty good in general government. We are underspent based on the projection overall. But when we look at our labor and our non-labor, our labor is running a little bit hot, and most of it has to do with some overtime in departments. That's the significant portion of that. But the non-labor in departments is at an underspend at the end of October at about 68%. So collectively, between the labor and the non-labor, the departments are doing very well. I'll note that as we close out the year and we make adjustments for final payments or additional leave cash outs that might be required, we will be bringing the number, I think at the end, the result will be a lot closer to budget and not such a gap showing the underspend. At least that's what I think is going to happen, at least on 2020. So the October monthly report, we're not going to give that on the addendum for the 26th. We'll get it to you in February. And I also believe that we'll be able to give you November, because I think November closed, I think either yesterday or Tuesday. So we'll be able to get that information to you, and then we'll do a year-end report. So far, I'm not seeing any unusual events or surprises that we haven't already talked about before for a couple departments. So that is where we are on 2020, and I will stop there before I move to 21, Madam Chair, if there's any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbur. Any questions from members? I don't see anyone in the queue, so if you want to go ahead and continue.
Thank you. For 2021, OMB has prepared a schedule for the first quarter budget revisions. I've got some feedback from the executives. I need to make a couple adjustments there. My plan would be to get that out no later than Monday. I'll certainly send a copy to the assembly members, make sure that Desiree has a copy there. We've made the adjustments, the one adjustment on the approval schedule that recognizes I think we just recognize on the calendar the new assembly meeting for the special, potentially a special election in May. But other than that, I think the schedule and the timing is going to be pretty much the same as last year. We can anticipate, I'm going to be working with the mayor's office to get a memo out asking departments if they have any first quarter budget revisions, that we start that process on February 1st, and they will be due on February 26th. That will give the administration enough time to consider what we are able to include into 2021. And Alex's team is working on, as they work to close the year, we'll get a firmer fund balance number, and then we can put that into the mix before we present it to the assembly, and that will come to you in April. So that's the general schedule for the first quarter budget. Would like to add one more piece to that, as Alex mentioned, just a little bit of more information. When the assembly approved the use of CARES funds that then we moved into first responder that created a fund balance, all of that was 2020 dollars. In order for us to continue those programs that the assembly had approved on those assembly documents, we need to now move that money from 2020 into 2021 and show it into those departments that are going to be managing those programs. We're not going to be changing the amounts. We just need to make sure that that money lives in 2021, and the proper way to do that is through a supplemental appropriation. And that is the document that Alex mentioned that we will be laying on the table. The timing of it, I will include, is that the sooner that we have the ability to do that, the less risk we pose into delays in the programs that the Assembly and the administration identify they want to fund. So we would introduce it on the 26th, act on it on the 9th, and be on our way. So we will be providing you some information and with a general discussion in the AM that, as I just described. So those are the highlights for 2021. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to entertain them. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbur. We've got a question from Ms. Zelatel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to pass on to Mr. Wilbur and Mr. Slivka and the rest of the committee here that I received 3 compliments as the 2021 budget was basically about the speed in which the budget was loaded into SAP. So praise for SAP doesn't often come, but it came from 3 different sources. So I wanted to pass along that information. Thanks.
Thank you, Assemblymember Zalatel. You know, we appreciate that. I know that it's has had some bumps in the road, but I did ask my staff the other day, this budget to actuals report, if we took out how many times OMB actually looks at this report, we had over 1.5 million hits, and since we put this system together, and we've had over 40,000 hits from departments or assembly members or others who have access to SAP. If they want to know how their budget's doing on any given day for whatever purpose, they can go into that report and look it up. And in the first 20 days of the year, it got hit 40,000 times. So people are looking on how their budgets, and mostly it's coming from departments, project managers, and finance managers inside departments. So a very useful tool.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbur. And thank you, Ms. Zelatel. Good to have the record reflect a compliment for SAP. Any other questions or comments from members for Mr. Wilbur? Okay, I guess back to you, Mr. Wilbur.
I think that concludes my report. I don't have, I think my comment on the impacts of the COVID on the budget is really that supplemental process we have to advance. So please look forward to that. And that is all I have for budget. Not on the agenda here, but I know I've had some questions in the past from assembly members. We do a monthly report on performance measures, and we have to put that into the assembly for introduction before the performance measures are due. So you'll see that on your agenda for the 26th. I think we have them all but 4 departments, but by the 30th, which is when their departments are required to post them, they shall all be posted at the required time by the end of January. So I just want to note that there have been some questions, and I appreciate the interest on the performance measures from assembly members. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbur. I believe that will be item 10F2 AIM 13-2021, the Q4 2020 performance measure report. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to the MOA financial status. So back to you, Mr. Slivka.
And I will turn this over to Mr. Dan Moore to provide an update, and I believe the documents he's going to reference were sent to you previously.
Okay, this is Dan Moore, the city treasurer, and hopefully you all can hear me. I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen, and let me give that a try here. Just a moment.
And let me just note too that the documents have been posted to the committee's webpage.
Okay. All right, so let's see. Did that share my screen at all?
Not yet.
Pop up? Not yet? Okay, hang on. I'll try one more time. I've been having a little bit of trouble, so make this quick. Okay, share screen, and let's see. Yeah, I don't think I'm gonna be able to get it to work today. Sorry. So I'll go ahead, and since you already have it, hopefully you can refer to it. I'll just give you the highlights. I apologize, my computer's acting up. Okay, so the highlights are, there's 3 pages here. The first one is an executive summary. Oh, great. Whoever's sharing that, thank you. That's perfect. Okay, so just to highlight, in the opening paragraph, what we say is that the current projected year-end revenue variance, this is the negative revenue variance for 2020, is $20.2 million negative revenue variance. And that, when I say that, that's comparing what was budgeted by the Assembly and OMB versus what we project to actually come in for final year-end numbers. We do have a substantial amount of actual data that's already posted in SAP. However, there still are, I think it's upwards of $20 million of various contributions, year-end adjustments, additional taxes that still need to be posted. So that usually comes in the next couple months. So anyway, that's where the number is. To put some perspective on this, just a couple months ago, that number was as high as 25 million of negative revenue variance. So there's been some sort of wind at our backs the last couple months, and that's always a good thing when you can end the year with you know, a little bit of a positive surprise. So in terms of the highlights on this page, when we compare this report to what we would have shared with you about a month ago, it's about a $2 million positive swing variance. About half of that is due to the investment earnings. And we've said in the past that that's a particular area, revenue area, that can swing significantly month to month. And so in this case, the month of December, which is still projected, it's not a final official year-end number, but our best projection, this is with the help of public finance, is that it will come in about $500,000 over budget. And that's an $800,000 improvement, $810,000 improvement from the prior month. The MOA Trust Fund is going to come in pretty much on budget, just as we expected. It's going to be $14 million of dividend. However, the budget could have been revised by OMB, but I think they chose to just not let it be revised, let it be a positive variance. There's no shortfall at all. It's just a question of whether or not you revise the budget or just let it show as a positive variance. So that's as expected, the trust fund coming in with $14 million of an annual dividend. The third one, prior year expense recovery, that improved a little bit. It's mostly things like the Chugiak fire station. There's a little bit of, I think, MLP sale element that came in there, but it's just a little bit positive. TORA, which is the transfer of responsibility agreement for traffic signals, that has actually been paid, and that the actual payment came in $250,000 greater than expected. In the middle section there, these are areas that we still need more information on because they're significant dollar-wise, and we don't have 100% of the information. The first one is on property tax, and we have had all the due dates occur by now. The personal property tax, which deals with businesses and with mobile homes, that had an extended due date of December 31st. So we won't know until about the first week of February what the result of those payments were. We did see the cash flow come in. We don't expect any major shortfall in terms of personal property payments. But what we don't know is, did we get 99% or 95%? We just don't know exactly how much of what was billed was actually paid by the due date. For any entity, whether it's a business or a mobile home, that was unable to pay by the due date, they would then be subjected to the late payment penalty if they did not pay within the 7-day grace period. And right now, in general, there is some expectation that there is a very small percentage of the taxpayer population that paid late, more so than in a typical year. And that would have, I'm sure, been due to COVID. The tobacco tax revenue, we have data through November that could swing depending on how the three major wholesalers purchase their product. So we don't know. Right now it's a $20 million budget, and we're expecting it to hit budget, but it could swing positive or negative $500,000 easily. The ambulance service fees is one we've mentioned before. That's $3 million under budget, under revenue budget. There is some year-end adjustments that the controller division does that could affect that account, fairly materially. It could be tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars of a swing. The rest of them listed there, I'm not going to go through all of them. The good news is there's a slight uptick in room tax. This is based on some sample information we received from major hotels for November. Rental vehicle tax, pretty much steady. It's a low time of year. Marijuana sales actually started going up again. So that was interesting to see. That's based on actual November data plus a little bit of December data. Motor fuel tax is unfortunately a little bit worse. This is directly caused by COVID. What we're basing it on is the Federal Energy Agency projects the usage of fuel. And right now the projection is for this time of year, it's going to be 11% less fuel consumption than it would have been a year earlier in a more normal year. Motor
Mr.
vehicle register. Go ahead. Sorry.
And just pause you for one moment to note for the record that we were joined by Miss Allard at 1:28 p.m. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Madam Chair. Just a couple other ones, and then I'll move on to the next page. The motor vehicle registration tax, that one is actually now very close to budget. It had been lagging by quite a bit earlier in the year. The months of October and November came in stronger than expected. We think this is speculation, we don't know for sure, but part of it might have been a backlog that the state DMV caught up on some processing on our behalf. But there's also the possibility that with the very low interest rates and with people having different ways of spending their money, whether it's on appliances or home improvement or whatever, it could be that new car sales may have picked up just a little bit. But again, that's speculation. We don't know for sure. The only other one to point out here, just building safety fund is really very much on top of budget, and that was a result of the reduced fees that the Assembly approved. Okay, so I'm going to go on. If you could, whoever's controlling can go on to the next page. The next handout that was there. Okay, that's the one. All right, so on this one, the only thing to point out is, again, these numbers all are the same you saw on the prior page, but this is the breakout by category, by major category of revenue type. So you have taxes, construction, investment, construction revenues, investment or revenues, etc. On this, if you were to add up the top two under taxes, which are room tax and rental vehicle tax, and you take into account one other tax, a fuel tax, those are all negative. They're significantly negative. It's all COVID related. You offset that with about $1 million positive in the marijuana area. That explains about 70% of the overall variance. So everything else is, especially in some of these variable market-driven type areas like construction, investment, is actually fairly close, surprisingly close to budget. The areas where it dealt with usage, which is under selected departments, so you have health department, transportation, parks and rec, those areas were hurt by COVID, and so that's the bulk of the revenue variance on that one. So that's the summary of that page. The last one, if you could go to the third and final page. Thanks for offering the time here. I know I'm going a little longer than usual. Again, same set of numbers, but instead of looking at this in terms of major revenue categories, this is breaking it out by groupings of departments, and these are departments under which they fall. So if the CFO, is the head of the finance department, you'll see that department fall under CFO grouping, and so on. So again. The biggest variances really fall under the CFO under a category, the very first line called taxes and reserves, and that's primarily that room tax, the rental vehicle tax, and the motor fuel tax. The rest of the departments on whole are doing quite well. The only other department that really sort of sticks out is the fire department, and that's directly related to that ambulance service fee revenue. That was a more of a timing issue than it was a sort of a permanent negative revenue variance. We're hoping in year 2021 that revenue will come more to fruition. So the only final comment I have, and I'll open any questions, is just to caution the Assembly that it's right around $20 million negative revenue variance. Normally at this time of year, we kind of go dark for 2 or 3 months before we give you sort of the closest year-end version of revenues we can. What we're going to do, though, this year is we're going to give you these same 3 pages a month from now to keep you in the loop. And so there's no real break in time frame because COVID has thrown in so many unknowns and everything else that we want to keep you tuned into the revenues, even in a time where normally we'd sort of be more silent. So that's the plan. The final year-end comprehensive report that we would give to the Assembly will be in the latter part of March. It'll be after the Controller Division has done their year-end accounting adjustments. Those accounting adjustments can be tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, sometimes even single-digit millions of dollars. So it's really to be determined what those accounting adjustments are going to be. And because of COVID, that probably is going to affect like how certain balances are trued up by the Controller Division in a more in not ordinary way. So just to caution you, there could be some more swings, even though we have a lot of actual information kind of already on record and posted into SAP. So that's the summary. And like I said, we'll be back with you again a month from now to give you a further update.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Do members have any questions or comments on this section of the agenda?
Okay.
I don't see anyone in the chat. I do have a question, Mr. Moore. These revenue documents, will they be prepared in an AIM and submitted for the agenda, or are we just seeing these as drafts until they're finalized in a couple of months?
I was hoping, if it's okay with the Assembly, because we normally actually don't provide revenue reports at this time of year, I was hoping that through this committee process, which is public and all, that these documents that are submitted can be part of the official point in time report that can be widely available for anyone to look at. And then we would do that for January and for February, and then we would have the full report with an AIM submitted in the latter part of March.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense. Any
Thank you.
questions or comments for Mr. Moore before we move on? Okay, I don't see anyone in the chat here, so we'll go ahead and go back to a previous item with Mr. Slivka. Mr. Slivka, would you address what you put in the chat concerning the additional CARES Act money?
Certainly, through the chair, I placed in the chat a link which was from the U.S. Treasury frequently asked questions in relation to the $35 million in funds that we received today. It does answer the question that yes, utility relief, it can be used for utility relief. It does not address the question of whether 10% can be used for case management. So I am seeking the answer to that. In relation to the agenda, the only other thing I would add relative to revenue impacts based on COVID, I think one of the things we've mentioned many a time, and the Assembly has seen it through the documents they've had to approve through the emergency ordinances to allow, I believe the number is 72 million to be spent on COVID to be recovered through FEMA public assistance. We continue to be very focused on that process. It's highly likely that at the end of the year, we still had roughly 4 million in relation to earthquake expenses that hadn't yet been reimbursed by FEMA. And just as a reminder, we started the year with roughly 9 million, so we got 5 million back. Relative to COVID, we probably ended the year roughly 23 million having been expended but not reimbursed. We actually received our very first reimbursement toward the end of December in the net amount of roughly 2.2 million. And I say net because we received 2.5, but we had to give them back 250,000 that we had already been reimbursed for elsewhere, and of course you're not allowed to do that. So the net impact of that is 27 million of expenditures that we hope to recover in 2021, but that will have a significant negative impact on the calculated fund balance at the end of the year. Lance, as we work through, and I've been talking about this, and as we work through first quarter budget revisions, our best estimate is that we will have a fund balance probably assumed zero, meaning we've met our debt rating requirement, but it's so very hard to know at this point in time what that number will be. But in order to not delay the budgeting process, we're just going to assume that it's a zero. We should have that number, our estimate on fund balance, by the end of March. And it just takes a long time to close the year. And as Lance said, there's multitudes of adjustments that need to be made. The other thing I do want to remind everybody, I think it got mentioned before, is the sale of ML&P is going to add additional work relative to our year-end audit. We're working already diligently with BDO, and so I believe we will still make our target, which is have the audit done by June 30th, but ML&P was a huge transaction, and so it could complicate things a little. And the final thing I just want to remind everybody relative to our auditor that BDO is hired by the clerk on behalf of the assembly to audit the administration. So BDO is independent of the administration, and they are, as they have said to you, going to be auditing all of our use of CARES grant funds, and so that audit will be independent, and their work, in addition, there's both the CAFR as well as the single audit, and that single audit is very much going to include how the CARES money was received and how it was spent. And I will stop there.
Thank you, Mr. Slivka. We have a few people in the chat. First, we have Ms. Kennedy with a FEMA reimbursement question, and then Mr. Bockenstead is available to answer questions concerning rental relief, and then we have Mr. Constant. So Ms. Kennedy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question in regard to FEMA reimbursement is that I was told, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, and I haven't really followed up on it yet, that we had actually reassigned some employee positions in the hopes that they were going to be FEMA reimbursed, and apparently we have discovered that they will not be. So though you've used the 23 million figure that's been expended and but not yet reimbursed, do we have a figure now that basically tells us what we think of that won't actually be eligible for reimbursement at this point? Thanks.
Yes, through the chair, we actually came to that determination several months ago in terms of, because what Ms. Kennedy is discussing is that a number of existing budgeted positions were reassigned to the EOC, and pretty clear those existing budgeted positions, that's not reimbursable. So all of those funds have been pulled out, moved back into the departments. So the number that I quoted earlier of roughly 23 million net unreimbursed at the end of 2020, that is a number we believe will be completely reimbursed by FEMA. And what was the other question you had? I'm sorry.
Well, thank you. That helps with the 23 million. But what amount was discovered that it wasn't going to be reimbursed? Do you have a dollar figure for how much we kind of expended toward the emergency effort, but we realize won't actually be FEMA reimbursable?
Off the top of my head, I want to say that number was close to $6 million, and again, that was, it's not really money that we lost, because that was money that was in the budget, and the vast majority of departments who lent people to the emergency response did not replace those people, so there weren't a lot of additional labor expenses incurred. It's just money that was already in the budget, already covering those positions. So the net impact at the end of the day is not going to be that great. If
okay,
that helps.
That answers. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And Madam Chair, if I could just hop in real fast. This is Jason Bockenstead. I think one of the other things that we're definitely cognizant of and paying very close attention to is there is a new administration. There are a number of executive orders that are being proposed and signed that are going to change probably quite significantly what is and what is not FEMA reimbursable. So over the next several weeks, I fully expect that things that we didn't necessarily think were reimbursable might very well become reimbursable as a result of decisions that this new administration is making as they focus on the COVID-19 pandemic. So there will be a lot more to come on that. We just don't know what that world kind of looks like right now.
Thank you, Mr. Bockenstead. Anything else, Ms. Kennedy?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and move to a question from Mr. Constant and then Mr. Weddleton. Mr. Constant?
Thank you. So the purpose of this question is really just to bring the rest of the body into the loop of the conversation. I'm having an ongoing manner with the administration on reporting for the CARES Act funds and preparation for any audit processes that go forward. Alex, do you think that the BDO is going to be able to provide for us a report of every entity that received funding through the municipality? Because that's the level of detail I'm really hoping we get to.
Yeah, through the chair. So Mr. Constant has made a request of the administration, which we are working to try and respond to, which is, of the 135 million that got spent, who got it? And we are, as I think we've said, we are working on getting the money into the community, and in an era where we didn't go out and hire additional people to help do this, and in an era where there isn't a lot of excess staff at the MOA, trying to compile this data while at the same time trying to get the money out, we kind of had to choose which task we wanted to do. So that's a very long way of saying BDO is going to look at what did the money get spent on. They're probably going to sample some of the programs and see if they complied with Treasury guidance. But they are not going to compile what Mr. Constant has requested, which is exactly where did all the money go. So we are working to compile that, and as soon as we have the time, we will distribute that to the public and to the assembly.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Thank you, Mr. Slipka. Mr. Weddleton?
Well, my question was essentially Chris's, but he said perfect, and I'm guess I see Mr. Slipka's point, but I sure wish I had that now, because without that information, people can make up their own information, and it's not presenting well. So sooner is better.
Through the chair, I completely understand that, and I think, as I said to Mr. Constant, we have been very straightforward with what we've been doing, and what the money has been spent on. That obviously hasn't stopped people from making things up, and I think no matter what we're doing in the era we live today, people will still make things up. So we are doing our best.
Madam Chair, just briefly, I would add that in private, I said the same thing that Mr. Weddleton, you just said, that it's important that we get this as soon as we can, because in a void, all manner of things will grow, but with the truth, we can make a very clear stand.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Mr. Weddleton, did you have anything else? Mr. Weddleton?
No, thank you. Sorry, no.
Thanks. Okay, do members have any other questions or comments? And I want to point out again that Mr. Bockenstead is available to answer any rental relief questions. Okay, I don't
Madam
see.
Chair, if you don't mind, I don't know how much or if Alex went into any of kind of late breaking information that we received today on this, but I'm happy to kind of share that and again answer any questions. But I think, as everyone knows, the relief package that passed Congress changed some of the rules around who or what entities could go directly to Treasury for funding in certain programs. If you remember, under the CARES Act, that threshold or that population limit was set at 500,000. So any city or county that had more people than 500,000 could go directly to Treasury for the funding in the different programs. We spent a lot of time working with our delegation, with the Conference of Mayors, the National League of Cities, and others, trying to get that threshold lower. And we were successful, at least as it pertains to the emergency rental relief program, the $25 billion. That threshold was lowered to 200,000. I think, as many of you know, the state of Alaska, the entire state, is allocated $200 million for rental and utility assistance in this program. We submitted an application directly to the Treasury Department saying we don't want to have to go through the state for this. We obviously have more than 200,000 people. We did that. We actually heard back today, early this morning, that application was accepted and approved, and we are expecting probably within the next couple of days to receive somewhere in the neighborhood of $36 million from the Treasury Department for this program. So that being said, one of the things we are working on, and I need to obviously reach out to the clerk and probably Felix as well, is figure out how do we get that in front of the body as quickly as possible for your approval as an appropriations, so that we can then turn around and begin to implement that program here over the coming weeks. So really good news. I think we're really excited about that. Again, the state then will receive the balance of that $200 million. We are committed to working closely with AHFC as well as some of our other partners, such as CEHA, that again, they'll likely also receive some funding for this as well. So we're committed to working very closely with them to ensure that this money is put into the community, as quickly as it possibly can. It's meant to and designed to probably last a number of months. Again, going back to my earlier comment about we don't necessarily know kind of some of the rules associated with it, since there is a new administration that just took over yesterday. The previous administration at about 9 or 10 o'clock at night on the 19th released about a 2.5-page FAQ on this program. I am already hearing that there are going to be significant changes to that, specifically around what utilities are or not allowed to be helped, or which ones we can use this money to help pay for. The previous administration explicitly said it could not be used for telecommunication utilities. We think that was a very bad move and not smart, and we are hearing that the new administration agrees with us and will likely make that change to include telecommunication utilities, phone and internet in that as well. So there are also a number of other things in terms of some definitions that even in this FAQ, they specifically said the secretary has not made a determination on that. So there will be a lot more to come on that, but wanted you guys to kind of hear that first from us. And again, happy to answer any questions, at least to the extent that I know them as of today.
Thank you, Mr. Bockenstead. And actually, the questions are queuing up. We've got about 7 minutes left, and I want to be sure to leave a few minutes at the end for public participation. First, we have Ms. Kennedy, followed by Mr. Dunbar, and then Mr. Constant. Ms. Kennedy?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll be brief. I appreciate the report, Mr. Bockenstead. That was very detailed in terms of, like you said, as much as we know at this point, so that's good. And my question was really going to be around, what can we tell the public in terms of how soon relief could be available? So I probably know the answer that, as soon as possible, but that I don't know if you have anything more where you can say, well, in a week or 2 weeks, that would be helpful. But the other question then was just the distribution systems. You know, we've got some pretty good practice and experience now at how we distribute these funds. So are we sticking with the old procedures? So anyway, those 2 questions. Thanks.
Yes, through the chair, Assemblymember Kennedy, I will say that I don't have an exact date yet. One, we still don't have the money, and we still have to get approval from the Assembly. I assume that that will be forthcoming when we have the documents ready to put in front of you. But I think you're exactly right. As soon as possible, we want to work. We've had a number of initial coordination meetings with AHFC and CHA. We would like to try to figure out a way to streamline and have maybe the same application, you know, for each of the organizations, because again, there is some more, there's additional reporting requirements that's associated with this funding that was not there previously. So we're going to have to do a good job of kind of collecting that information and making sure that we gather it. To your kind of second question, that is our hope. We have obviously learned a lot over the last several months in terms of how to get the money that we already are using for rental and mortgage assistance out into the hands, and we would like to continue to improve on that. And I think as soon as we have kind of all of that information available, we will surely share it with you as well as a whole bunch of others, because we don't want people to fall through the cracks. And to the extent that you know, folks haven't heard about our current program, we would really like to make sure that at the end of this program, there isn't anyone that says they weren't aware that there was this type of assistance available.
Thank you, Mr. Bockenstead. And Ms. Kennedy, we'll go ahead and move on. I understand you may have some follow-up, but we'll move on now since we're running out of time to Mr. Dunbar and then Mr. Constant real quick. Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I apologize. I got called away right as you were answering Ms. Kennedy's question, so I apologize if you already answered this, but I think it is crucial. Like at my community council tonight, can I say, you know, $36 million in this fund? So, you know, use 211, use the same doors that you were using before, and try to apply. Is that a message I should tell people?
Through the chair, Assemblymember Dunbar. I think it will. I think it will be the same kind of number. We still, I believe, will partner with United Way. A lot of that will stay the same. I do think that the application process is going to be changed simply because of the additional information and other eligibility requirements that are going to be associated with this funding that weren't in our previous iteration. So I guess from my perspective, I think you can certainly begin to share that the municipality is going to receive this money, and we will be working as quickly as possible to develop the you know, the application and the mechanism in which they can reach out. I wouldn't expect that is going to take us very long, though. So within the next, I'd say, several weeks, we will be ready to go on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Could I get a motion to extend for 5 minutes?
So moved.
Thanks. And thank you. I know some folks have a hard stop. Okay, Mr. Constant?
Yeah, thank you, Jason. So we have a number of individuals who previously were termed out of the program because they received 3 months of support. Are you intending to make sure that those people are eligible again?
So through the chair, Assemblymember Constant, this is a brand new program. So the folks that have received assistance in the past, those months will no longer count towards this.
That's essential. Thank you.
This is a brand new program, and just so folks know, it is for assistance for up to 12 months. So, and I believe it can be extended a couple of additional months under extenuating circumstances. So
yeah, but the money won't go that far.
Months of support.
Yeah, the money won't go that far, but it's only 36. We spent, what, 20 so far. And so, okay, but it is fair to tell people who are previously maxed out that they can reapply.
Yes.
Thank you.
Those months will not count towards this program.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Constant. Thank you, Mr. Bockenstead. Ms. Zelatel, you had put a note in the chat. Would you like to speak to that?
Really brief because I'm going to have to sign off, but there's a CARES Act relief survey. As if you all remember, we did a survey to individuals who had received relief or applied for relief. Excuse you. And those results for the survey are in the meeting agenda for this coming Tuesday. So I encourage you all to take a look as we look at this next round of funding.
Thank you, Ms. Zelatel. We will go ahead and move on, since we're at the top of the hour, to audience participation. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak? Mr. Haberman? Hello? Hi, we can hear you.
I'll be brief.
Thank you. You've got
start my
minutes.
timer, but I'll be very brief. Number one, I made an announcement to the Assembly Committee meeting earlier today, request to make sure the doors are open for the public to be. For the Rules Committee tomorrow that starts at 10, have it open at least 30 minutes before. When I made that request, Assembly Member Weldon says, well, I don't know if we're going to do it that way or whatever. You're going to have that meeting there or whatever. The fact is you need a 24-hour notice for time, date, and location meetings. That meeting is being advertised as being at LUSAC Live for the public to be there. And what's the story? That's number one. I'm being brief because I want to get on, and you need to get on with what you have to do. Two, this committee started with a note that you didn't have a quorum to start the meeting, but staff said it was okay. I'm talking about this committee that we're having right now. And because as long as you don't make any decisions, you can have the meeting without a quorum. Well, you're wrong. And if any staff is saying that or legal is saying that, you need a quorum just like an assembly meeting. A regular assembly meeting, you need a quorum to have a meeting, and that was wrong. And that's all I have to say. I wish you all the best. Oh yeah, one last thing, just a note of history, because I'm really being short here on time. Before COVID happened, you would have your committee meetings in like City Hall downstairs, and I'll be there. And I couldn't help but notice when it came to public comment, and I'll be the one that speaks, and generally no one else is there but me, right? And I couldn't help but notice, but before that happens, assembly members get up, particularly certain ones, and leave without hearing public comment. So what I'm saying to you all right now is I'm in the dark to know who really is on the assembly listening to public comments as I speak now, and is there really a quorum? And that's all I have to say. And respectful, you got public comments, you should listen to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Haberman. Appreciate your participation. Just one note, the Rules Committee meeting is a hybrid and will be in person, over the phone, and on Teams Live as well. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak? Oh,
so the library going to be open? Is the library going to be open to be there, LUSAC?
Mr. Rivera, are you on? Could you confirm that?
Yes, the LUSAC library will be open. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Haberman. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak?
Hi. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Louis Imbriani, for the record. And looking at this agenda meeting and listening to you guys talk about the impacts of COVID-19, the wording is wrong. It's not the impacts of COVID-19. It's the impacts of the decisions that the mayor, the acting mayor, and the assembly has allowed to happen. We know who is at risk, and we should have been focusing on how to protect them. Now we are all paying the price, not only emotionally, spiritually, but also financially. The municipality has lots of different wedding venues and other things that bring in tourists and people from outside, and a large majority of those are going to be not booked. One caterer even posted stating that almost 100% of her bookings are full for the months of May through September. Not a single one is in Anchorage. The revenue that could have brought into the city, because people are so unsure about what they can do here in Anchorage, is crazy. We're living day to day. We don't know when the next mandate's coming. We don't know when the next mandate is going to be lifted so that we can go back to living our lives and providing not only for the community, but for our families. That's it. Have a good day.
Thank you, Mr. Imbriani. Appreciate your participation. Are there any other members of the public here who wish to testify? Okay, I don't see anyone else. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you. We are adjourned. Appreciate you all joining. Have a good day.
Thank you.